it worked. And this is sometimes, too, the advantage of having a call sign that people know. Like if you've already worked on several bands and modes, chances are the operator in their database now, which they have, you know, they get a letter or two and they're thinking, oh, yeah, the guy probably sent an email, you know, whatever. He might have worked me anyway, but I was doing everything I could to make the odds greater that if he got a couple of letters in my call sign, he would think it was me. And that's something that's important too. Good operators, they don't need to hear the whole call sign. They'll go with one letter or two letters. They have experience. They know who the call signs are most likely to be calling them. These are sharp operators. On the expeditions, some of them are world-class contesters, some are not. But the point is, they want to work every station possible, so you do everything to help yourself, and they'll help get you over the goal line, so to speak. In short, you have to be persistent and sometimes lucky. But if you aren't persistent, then you usually don't get to experience the luck. This is also true of working DX stations on other than their ordinary beam heading. If you don't hear a station with the antenna pointed at them, try a different beam heading. If you long path if it's near your or his gray line, skew path if there's low solar flux and or geomagnetically disturbed conditions. Here's a great example. In the 2014 CQ Worldwide Sideband Contest, I heard a very weak KH6, which I needed on 20. It was well after dark, so normally I point to being west. Well, he disappeared when I pointed my 5-element antenna west. It was kind of odd. Now, I knew the conditions were disturbed, so I thought, well, maybe he's coming long path. So I moved the antenna back to long path. Nope. Okay, not long path, not short path. So I tried by the North Pole, because sometimes, you know, guys out in the Pacific, even if they're not that far out, you'll hear them polar, especially if there's an aurora. If it's the beginning of an aurora, very often you will hear them propagated through the disturbance. If it's on the backside of the aurora, often you'll hear nothing. Well, no, I didn't hear them by the North Pole either. So I'm thinking, where the hell is it coming from? I could hear them just about S1 to S2 on peaks, but not nearly enough to work them through the 6s. So I was baffled. So I go back to listening on my trusty 20-meter dipole, which is broadside north-south, in a tree, 25 feet up. Sure enough, there he was. North-south dipole. Okay. So I turned my top 20 at 130 feet towards the south. And he went from S0 to S7. I called and worked him easily. And I told him, hey, by the way, you're coming into the South Pole. It was one of the most unusual paths that I can ever recall. I have made countless QSOs. I have never worked Hawaii via the South Pole in 20 meters. Never. I probably never will again. If not for my 20-meter north-south dipole at 30 feet, I would never have thought to look in that direction. And why did I even think to listen on it? Because it just happens to be the open position on my phasing box in 20 meters. I have the 5/5/5 in any combination, and the fourth position I have that little north-south dipole. And often that north-south dipole is the only thing that will hear a station. Whether it's a station in the null or a station that's high angle, it's worth its weight in gold. And we'll get into antennas and whatever. One of the biggest myths is that because you have a lot of antennas on a tower, you're loud. Wrong. You need to have all kinds of antennas, and sometimes the most humble little dinky antenna that, like I used to make when I was a novice, is the very thing that allows you to work and hear guys, but all your other wonderful stuff doesn't. Also, you might want to consider upgrading your coaxial cable to the best that makes sense. If you have a 50-foot run to your tower, don't waste money on hardline. When RG213 berry stacks, or even a good grade of RG8X, will be 98% as good and incredibly cost effective. I used RG8X for many, many years, and in fact, I still do with some of my wire antennas with as much as 300-foot runs of coax. Because on certain frequencies, the difference between hardline and RG8X is virtually indistinguishable, even over a couple hundred feet. So why not spend 12 or 13 or 14 cents a foot rather than $1.98 per foot plus a ridiculous amount for connectors and shipping costs? The point is that, you know, do what makes sense. Often people use overkill and they spend a lot of money that can be used better places in their station. Louder definitely is better. An amp can do wonders to improve your chances of being heard in working stations. But a gain antenna on two or more rotatable antennas at different heights can improve your chances both on receive and transmit. And that's far more effective than just increasing your power. If you can't hear it, you can't work it. It is true that if it can't hear you, you can't work it either. But if you can get a twofer, if you can be louder on receiving and transmitting, that's the best thing of all. And most of you have the ability to get louder just that way before you turn the amplifier on. Okay, now we haven't covered antennas, phasing antennas, towers, terrain modeling. All these things are very important. We only have so much time in the day, so we can do that another time. All right, you've been very patient. Let's have questions. Yes?
I've got a question regarding high power, super high power, and the 100 watt from a common transceiver.
Okay. And what's your question?
Do you find that a lot of the big guns exceed the power by a couple of dB versus a common amplifier, or they have, you know, are you competing against the big guns legitimately, or are you needing the high power to get through?
Well, let's put it this way. The most competitive people, right? Competitive can mean a lot of different things to different people. But the real competitors, the ones that I respect, they drive themselves more than they look for illegal or unethical ways to boost their score. They're all about what I can do based on me. And if they're not loud enough, effective enough, they're not winning, they're not doing whatever they're doing, they spend the time to make themselves better, more effective. They work out all the little kinks in your station. They try to get every edge they can without becoming illegal. It matters to them, and they would rather die than cheat.
Right.
And then there are a lot of other people that, hey, you know, the line is kind of blurred. One thing about contesters and Dxers, most of the people approach things on the air the same way they do in real life. That's not always true, but it's mostly true. And it isn't just radio. Whether it's racing, whether it's sales, whether it's in your career, you find there are people who just take shortcuts and cut corners, and they excuse it away. And then there are other people that absolutely won't do that, even if it means they can't get to that level. All right? So personal ethics is really important. I know a lot of people, and I've operated some stations where they thought nothing of 5 kW out, rationalizing however they wanted to do that. Personally, I think that's bullshit. If you're willing to do that, if you think you have to do that, or if you choose to do that, I think there's something wrong with you. Really. It's sad. And, I would say that it used to be more common, but it's really not. You have an enormous amount of high-power cheating in Eastern Europe.
Right.
But you also have it locally, too.
Could be the whole culture.
It's no question. It's culture. And it's also, I think, depending on who your role models are. Who did you watch? Who mentored you? Who do you respect? Who did you watch operate? Whose station did you go operate? And then let's face it, we're all adults. We make our own choices. Nobody's forcing us to do anything. Now, I don't have a problem with people that, their amplifiers put out 2K and they're operating 1800. Is that over the line? Yeah. But is it really going to make a difference on the air? Is it really going to help their score? No, it's not. 1500 to 1800, you're talking about, maybe 0.3 dB. Does that matter? No way. So I don't have a problem with that. And who really even knows if they're getting that 1800 out? Maybe it's 1600, maybe it's 1900. The point is, that person is not using an amp that's over the line. They're using a commercially produced amp. The FCC knows about it and approved it. And if people want to drive it a little harder, they'll be nicer if they didn't, but I don't have an issue with that. You're running 3 kW out, yeah, I got a problem with that, or even 2.5K out. You're in a different class of amplifier already. That you can buy some of those commercially, but you're buying that not because, oh, well, I'll just drive it, maybe not as hard. No, you're buying that kind of amplifier because you intend to use that kind of power, even if you just turn it on to work at the expedition. it's not worth doing, really. If that's what you have to do to work an extra country or make another 5% to score, then you've lost a lot more than you would ever gain back by using that. Same thing with those people that use multiple. They have the exciter going to 2 different amplifiers driving different antennas. Now that's fine if you're splitting the power. That's actually pretty cool. I did that one contest in 160. That was really interesting. That's definitely a contest to do it in, where you have so many different bizarre forms of propagation in a given weekend. So that's cool. You want to drive 600 in this and 600 in that with 2 different antennas. Hey, go for it. But 1.5 kW in each? No, can't be doing that. So those are the kind of things. The differences are at the margin. So when the band is wide open, does it matter if you run 100 watts or kW? No. Where it matters is when the path is difficult, and you don't have gain antennas. So instead of the difference between 1 kW, 100 watts and 1 kW being 7 dB or 7.5 dB, it might be 3 or 4 S units. And while there are a lot of purists that say the difference in signals, the difference, mathematically, totally wrong. It just doesn't work like that. On a nice antenna test range in a very short distance with an antenna that doesn't move, yeah, that's what you should see. But when you're trying to work somebody 10,000 miles away, who knows what's going to happen to your signal by the time it gets there? And again, better to focus on the best antennas that you can buy or make, because then you get the benefits on receive and transmit. Use good cable. Again, you don't need heliacs, you don't need fancy hard line for small runs. Losing a dB might make a difference sometimes, but don't sweat it. Unless you're a professional or antenna test range or you're trying to be #1 in the world, it really doesn't matter. Did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
No, Bob, we used to have just wire antennas here, you told us.
Well, I still use wire antennas.
Can you describe them a little bit?
Oh, yeah, sure. Let me, in fact, you know what? Let me talk and show you the pictures at the same time.
And also, are you in an urban area or a rural?
Rural. Oh, yes. Well, that's by design.
That's a big difference, yeah.
I'm in southwestern Connecticut, about 10 miles as the crow fly from the New York border. So technically, I'm in New England. But I'm in New England about as much as an Eastern W2 is in New England. And that does matter because that extra 120 miles to the Atlantic Ocean makes an incredible difference very often, especially on the low bands, but sometimes on the high bands. There are times when I'm operating a different contest than the guys on the coast. And I'm not talking about the guys on a sandbar, out next to the Atlantic. I'm just talking about the guys 10 miles inland in Eastern Mass. With what I have, they're running stuff that I can barely hear, and I'm not. So that's a problem. There are other times where, on a given weekend, I may have better propagation than them. And, those are the breaks. But generally, the closer you can get to water, the further east you can go, the better. It really does matter. But where I am, I'm in extreme western Connecticut. I'm up on top of a hill where I can actually see the very low Adirondacks across the border into New York from when you climb on my tower. I have an incredible shot to the west. It's about as good as you can hope for. It's actually flat to the northeast, ironically. Europe is my worst direction. Not what it's kind of backwards. South is good, east is very good, northwest there's a little hill to Japan. Sometimes that matters, even though my antennas certainly stick over it. But the biggest problem I have is all the wildlife. Within now, I've been colonized by woodchucks, squirrels, owls. There's an eagle. We've had our eagle now for 6 years, which is really neat. Woodchucks. We have bobcats, foxes. Now this is western Connecticut. This is, I'm not in the Adirondacks or near Massachusetts. We've had bears. I haven't seen one. We've had coyote packs that come through. There's all kinds of wildlife. Why am I telling you this? Because invariably there are about 1,000 critters out there that can chew on my antenna cables and often do. So when I tell you about check your coax if things don't sound right, it's because often there are little needle marks if you look carefully. And of course we have endless field mice and rats and everything else. So with wire antennas in particular, they're not on a tower, and the coaxial feeds are not on a tower. They go through the woods, so they're prime targets for these little creatures. Okay, so to tell you about the antennas, let me just take you through the station quickly. So this is circa 1999. You can see the old VGA monitors. You can see two Titan 425s, one of which I still have and still use. I had just, around 1999, 2000 was when I bought my radios and I bought my Titans so that I could be a more competitive station now that my towers were finally going up after 25 years of guest operating. And what you see on the side here, I'll just point out, these are Comtech ACB4s. These were designed to phase wires for 4 squares. My own design, not the typical wavelength design, but rather a 3/4 wavelength, which I did it for a narrower or tighter pattern, and also because it fitted within my trees. So a lot of what I've done is unique for my QTH by either design or by necessity. These were WX0B stack matchers, where you could switch between 3 different antennas in any combination. This has been upgraded since then. This and these are 2 6-position antenna switches, and I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. These are 6 2-position antenna switches. What I did years ago when I was operating at KM1H, long before I built the station, I wanted to have a way to switch between antennas and radios immediately and not rely on any fancy solid-state circuitry or relays, which often would go bad in contests, and then you could waste an hour or 2 of time when you're terribly sleep-deprived and brain dead. So this was an issue, what to do. So I designed where I'd have the antennas come into this, and then this went to each of these boxes. So if I wanted 10 meters on the right radio, I'd switch this to the right position, and I'd switch this to 10 meters, and that would go right to this radio. And if I wanted to go to left radio, I simply switch it this way, and then switch this to 10 meters. A lot of manual switching, very labor intensive, very difficult, very fatiguing. But the good thing about it was I had something I can use for a reasonable amount of money, and I could put together myself. I'm great with designing and building antennas. I don't know much electronics, unfortunately. It's a weakness I have. So that's what these do. And the nice thing is when you blow something, it's very easily replaceable. I have a spare one of these. I have a couple of spares in these. 5-10 minutes, I'm back on the air. Very nice. Amplifiers, one amplifier for the left radio, one amplifier for the right radio.
10 techs?
Yeah, 10 tech, Titan 425.
Yeah.
And then FT1000, well, this was a TS930, this was a TS940, they're now FT1000 MPs. Beverage switching box here, a couple of beverages, able to switch between northeast, south, and west. Ability with this switch to have the same beverage on both radios at the same time.
How long?
Or in one radio. Beverages? They vary between, depending on the direction, anywhere from like 300. I had a pair of northeast phased 40-meter beverages. They were fabulous. They were only about 200 feet long and about 125 feet apart. I did a lot of antenna modeling to get it just right. The south beverage was about 600 feet. Great, especially going down the hill. There are now houses there, so it's a long line. And then the west beverage was about 580 feet, also heard really well. I had tried experimenting with 900 feet, but it wasn't too effective. And some of the terrain I had to go through was just horrendous. I'm up on a hilltop that has swamp and has ravines, and it's all on the ledge. It is just nasty, nasty stuff. Sticker bushes, holes in the ground, shafts. I'll show you some pictures. It is a nightmare. And getting my towers up and fixing antennas and getting them up, what an unholy mess. Wayne, who's been on my towers, knows what I'm talking about. But you go out in the deep woods there, it is frightful. And that doesn't even include the deer ticks, where there is an incredibly, incredibly serious problem in Fairfield County where I live, which is the highest incidence of Lyme in the world. And Lyme was just the beginning. The babesiosis, the ehrlichiosis, the Rocky Mountain spotted fever, all the other stuff out there is much worse. And now we have West Nile mosquitoes. I don't even go out in the woods anymore. I mean, it's, forget the rocks and the other stuff. This is really bad news. All right, so 10 meters, and now we're on, and all the rotators are up here on the right side. This is when I had one orientation. Watt meters, so I'm looking forward, even if I'm brain dead, eventually I'm gonna look at, my brain will figure out if something is working properly or not. That's very important. Have everything right in front of you so you're looking at it. Let me go through some of the pictures and I'll answer your question. So remember, this is 1999 thereabouts. That was my one Yagi in 2000 before I put up my towers. The little 4-element on the roof at about 25 feet high. That was the big antenna. Worked very well to the west, not very effective elsewhere. Before 1999, that didn't exist. I had all wire antennas on every single band, and it was good enough to do quite well. 1999, after antennas, we put up a 20-meter beam that day, and that's me when I had a lot more hair, and all the equipment worked better. That's a side view. You now see an AL1500, which is a wonderful amplifier. I still have that. I still think it's one of the best amplifiers you can buy at any price. All of the antenna switching boxes on the left, you see the two radios, you see the antenna switches. Over here, you see a couple of new things. These were Dune filters, so I would manually, when I was listening on a band, I would manually touch this particular bandpass filter and I would get filtered on this radio. What's that?
Array Solutions?
No, Dune. And then same thing on the right side. And these were my Palomar preamps, the best preamps I ever found. Unfortunately, they're no longer made, and you can't buy them. And I would use this to tune for maximum effectiveness on each band for each beverage. Incredibly physically exhausting way to operate two radios for 48 hours. I can't tell you how much this hurt my efficiency, but if you really want to do well, and this